I've known President Trump for 10 years. He like him or not, he exists loudly. He grows anxious when he has an unexpressed thought. It's all unfiltered. Now, some people like that and some people don't. I would think the media would love that. He talks to the media more than any president I've ever seen.
But the idea that President Trump is not deciding which version of himself we're going to see is absolutely wrong. I mean, if you know, and you interact with President Trump in private, I have over the course, the first time I interviewed Donald Trump was back in 2013 when he was just thinking about running for president. Yeah. And he has one setting when those cameras are on and one setting when those cameras are off.
Right.
And if he wanted to make a different decision about how to conduct himself in public, he is absolutely capable of doing that.
He's not going to.
But he's not going to. That is also correct.
And you can criticize it. This is America. You can say what you want. Now, you know, he's not going to like it. You might end up with a sombrero on your head. But he is what he is.
Washington, D.C. thought they had set the perfect trap. They thought no one was looking, and they thought they were untouchable. But today, Senator John Kennedy just walked into the room with the one thing they fear most: the cold, hard receipts. This isn't just a hearing. It's a crime scene investigation into a system that has been caught red-handed stealing your future. The elites are panicking. The room has gone stone-cold silent, and the truth is finally being broadcast to the world. If you are tired of being lied to, hit that subscribe button right now, because the exposure of the century starts today. Let's watch the trap spring shut.
Mr. Secretary, do you hate people who are different from you?
No, sir. I wake up every single morning and say, love the people, love the call.
Do you support the rule of law?
Absolutely.
Isn't a big part of your job to enforce the immigration laws?
Yes, sir, it is.
Can we agree that illegal immigration is illegal?
We should all agree on that. Yes, sir.
How many people do you think the Biden administration allowed into our country in violation of our immigration laws?
Unfortunately, they didn't keep good records. We don't even know how many kids were let into the country. Estimation is somewhere around 340,000 kids that we're trying currently to look for. With the numbers are estimated between 12 and 20 million came in illegally over the 4 years of the Biden administration.
And President Biden ignored the immigration laws with the cooperation and indeed, in some cases, the encouragement of some members of Congress, did he not?
Yes, sir. That's my recollection of it.
Why do you think the Biden administration and some of my colleagues, your former colleagues, why do you think they believe in open borders?
Sir, I have my theory behind that, and I would love to entertain the thought, but I'll try to keep my thoughts to myself and just do my job here. But I think I know my theory is pretty strong.
Well, tell me about it.
I'll probably get myself in trouble.
It's okay. You're already in trouble.
Yeah, but I don't know if this is a place to give my thoughts. I try to work in facts as much as I can, but it's hard to explain why they would allow that many people to come in and turn our streets into lawless cities and lawless towns.
I mean, does any other, let me try it a different way. Do you think vetting people at our border is racist?
No, sir. It's exactly what we should do, because we are charged, CBP and Department of Homeland Security is charged with keeping our homeland safe. We have to know who's coming in. We catch terrorists on a weekly basis trying to enter this country illegally or already entered this country illegally.
Do you think vetting people at our border, it sounds like you do, is prudent?
It is absolutely vital to the job we do to protecting our homeland.
And every other country vets people at the border.
They should, yes.
What happened to Delaney Hall?
Well, a lot of claims were made, and they just absolutely weren't true. The first one came out and said it was overcrowded. We have today, I believe, under 700 detainees there. It's licensed for just over 1,000 beds. We have twice the square footage at Delaney Hall than the state penitentiary does in New Jersey. They said that the medical condition was horrible. We have twice as much medical staff per person than the state penitentiary does in New Jersey.
What happened with the protesters?
Well, the protesters is interesting. The governor and the state officials were going out and saying that they were peaceful protesters and ICE was agitating them. That all changed when the governor finally allowed the state police to do their job. And by the way, they're professionals, and the locals there were absolutely professionals. When they came in, they quickly realized these aren't peaceful protesters. These are rioters.
Were some of the protesters or rioters violating the law?
Absolutely. Every time you verbally assault an officer by not saying that you're, whatever words you want to use, but when you say you're going to kill them and all their family, that's against the law. That's violating federal policy. When you put your hands on an officer, we had officers bit, we had officers scratched, we had officers poked, we had officers hit, we had objects thrown at them, we had car windows smashed in. All that is a federal crime and punishable, and we have zero tolerance for it. And those that we could arrest then, we did arrest. Those that we have on video, we're going through the video today, and we will eventually find you and arrest you as well and charge you.
Now, you have the right in America to protest, don't you?
I support the First Amendment, but you do it in a peaceful manner.
But you don't have the right to protest violently or in violation of the law, do you?
That is correct, Senator.
Isn't it? Last question, I know. Has it been your experience that most cops, most Border Patrol officers, most ICE agents will leave you alone unless you do illegal stuff?
And the senator's time has expired, so if you can keep this quick.
That is absolutely correct, and they love doing their job. They don't do it for the money. They do it because they're called to do it. And regardless if you're a local PD, you're a sheriff, you're state, or you're federal, all of them are willing to do their job because they feel called to do so. And you're not, for the most part, there's always a few bad apples, but for the most part, those officers, unless you're breaking the law, they're not going to bother you.
Okay.
That's my experience anyways.
Mr. President, we both know that there are people in Washington who like to muddy the water to make it look deep. They don't want the American people to know the truth. Because for these people to which I'm referring, truth is a concept that does not interest them. Politics does. Now, there's been a lot of controversy in and around the United States Senate for the last 2 weeks. If we're honest with ourselves, we have to admit that the Senate has been functioning like a broken arm with the bone sticking out. That's not anybody's fault, in my judgment, on my side of the aisle. It's certainly not the majority leader's fault. So I want to try to refocus us on the issue. I don't really want to talk about the ballroom or the anti-weaponization fund or any of the myriad of issues that my Democratic friends have tried to inject into our discussion. I want to talk about the issue. And the issue is this: are we going to fund the Department of Homeland Security or are we not? Part of DHS, as we call it, as you know, Mr. President, is funded. But a very important part is not. The Border Patrol and ICE. We're paying them as best we can out of another pool of funds that's about to run out of money. Why are they not funded? Because my Democratic colleagues have refused. At one point, my Democratic friends agreed to fund Border Patrol and ICE. And then they changed their mind. And they said, no, we're not going to do it. Which forced Republicans, if we want to see that portion of DHS funded, to proceed under what we call reconciliation, where we don't need Democratic votes. I regret that that's the case, but we're doing what we have to do. Why are we having this controversy? I don't get it completely. I don't. Unless you're industrial strength stupid, you know that illegal immigration is illegal. And that's what our Border Patrol agents and ICE agents do. They enforce the law. And we have a problem with respect to immigration. During the Biden administration, with the encouragement of some, not all, but with the encouragement of some, but not all, Democrats, opened the borders. They said, come on in. And about 8 to 12 million, some say 20 million people did. Some of them were good people and are good people. They're still breaking the law. Some of them who are here are not. They're rapists, and they're murderers, and they're sex traffickers, and they're drug dealers, and they're pedophiles. We don't know which is which. We don't know where they are. And it falls to the responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security, in part through Border Patrol and ICE, to find out. Now, why did this happen? Why do we now need Border Patrol and ICE more than ever? You know, I've thought about that a lot. It could be just pure, plain, vanilla incompetence. It could be that the people that President Biden put in charge of immigration and securing the border were not qualified to play dead in a Western movie. It also could be and could have been intentional. I think some of my Democratic friends, not all of them, I'm talking the Plattner wing of the Democratic Party, the Mayor Mamdani wing of the Democratic Party, the Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez wing of the Democratic Party, the wing of the Democratic Party that's in control. Some of them believe that vetting people at the border is racist. They do. Doesn't matter that every other country in the world vets people at their borders. These members of the, whatever you want to call it, progressive wing, loon wing, woktopus wing, whatever you want to call that wing of the Democratic Party, they think that vetting people at the border is racist. There are other folks who support open borders for political reasons. I think they honestly think that if they admit a bunch of people into America in violation of the immigration laws or not, that it's a rich source of potential voters. We're not supposed to say that, but I really do believe that. Not much happens around here that doesn't have a political bent to it. But regardless, we have a problem. And that's what we have to deal with. And that's what we're going to be voting on, I hope, in the next couple of days. If you disagree with the law, this is America, you're entitled to disagree with it. I get it. Try to change it. Go change it. But you can't just ignore our immigration laws. They're not some second-tier statutes that you can ignore without consequence, that you can ignore when you think it's convenient. They're the law, and we have to enforce the law. And more to the point, we have to clean up the mess that President Biden and some of my Democratic colleagues in the Plattner wing, the Ocasio-Cortez wing, the Mamdani wing, whatever you want to call those Democrats who believe it, created. And find more to even to that point, we have to have Border Patrol or Border Patrol and ICE officers to do it. We have to. The other point I would make, we see the pushback by this wing of my Democratic friends' party. We see what's going on in New Jersey. It's despicable. Look, you have the right to protest. That's as American as the NFL or baseball. You have the right to protest. You don't have the right to protest violently. And what we've seen at the Delaney Hall Detention Center, we've seen ICE officers and some Border Patrol officers. We've seen the protesters cursing at them and spitting at them and threatening their families and hitting them and scratching them and biting them and blocking ingress and egress in and out of the detention center. They're breaking the law. And they've been arrested. I think the Border Patrol and ICE and the state law enforcement officials in New Jersey have showed a lot of restraint. But what the protesters did, not all of them, was illegal. It was illegal. You can't hit a cop just because you don't like him. And here's a free tip. I know you know this, Mr. President. Most Border Patrol agents, most ICE agents, most cops, they will leave you alone unless you do illegal stuff. But if you do illegal stuff, they're going to enforce the law. So let me end as I began. We need to vote to fund Border Patrol and ICE. These men and women are running out of money. I am sorry that my Democratic colleagues have taken the position that they want to defund ICE. They have every right to believe that. I'm sorry that they have taken the position they want to defund the Border Patrol. My Democratic friends have every right to believe that. But they're wrong. I have the right to my opinion. And if they don't want to fund them, they need to go change the immigration laws. Until then, we've got to enforce them. And we're going to have the chance here in the next couple of days. And all we're going to be voting on, you're going to see all kind of amendments and talking about everything in the world. All we will be voting on. Do we or do we not want to fund Border Patrol and ICE? Do we or do we not want to enforce America's immigration laws in accordance with due process and the rule of law? And that's the issue that's going to be before us. And I'm ready to saddle up and ride. I'm ready to get to it. I'm tired of all the rhetoric and the tangential issues, and I'm tired of all that. Let's get after it. Let's do the right thing. Congratulations, gentlemen. Mr. Flowers, I want to ask you about an article you wrote last year called Departmentalism in the Age of Trump. Do you remember that?
I do, Senator. It was a speech that I gave.
Yes, yeah. And as I read it, you espouse the view that each department of the federal government has a responsibility to interpret the Constitution did you mean each department or each branch? Tell me about that article.
They'd be synonymous in this context. So I was referring to both branches. The theory of departmentalism is the view.
So you were referring to branches?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And the theory of departmentalism, which Abraham Lincoln is perhaps the most prominent person to espouse it, is the view that every single federal official takes an oath to the Constitution and has a duty to abide by it. So you sometimes hear people say that the Constitution is what the courts say it is. And that's not quite right. Every official has a duty to interpret the Constitution. So, for example, if the Supreme Court okay.
I get it. So Congress has a right to interpret the Constitution, right?
Correct, and a duty to do so.
Okay. What happens if Congress interprets the Constitution one way and the United States Supreme Court interprets it another? Who wins?
So if that law is challenged in court, the court has a duty to say what the law is, and with respect to those parties, they'll issue a judgment. So with respect to those parties, they'll win.
I get all that, but who wins?
So in that case, the court would win with respect to the parties. The law would, Congress would be free to pass the same law again.
Given the fact that the executive branch and the legislative branch, the federal government, both have the authority to interpret the Constitution according to your theory, as well, of course, as the courts. Is there any, suppose the executive branch interprets the Constitution one way and the Supreme Court interprets it another way, who wins?
So the court will win when the case comes, the court will win in the sense that it will interpret the law, and its interpretation of the law will be binding on the parties in the case before it. But it's not necessarily binding on future parties. So the executive would be free to try the same thing again with another party.
So are you saying that if the president disagrees with an interpretation by the Supreme Court, but the president is not a party, the president can ignore the Supreme Court ruling?
He could certainly not ignore the Supreme Court ruling with respect to the parties to whom the judgment applies. But Abraham Lincoln, famous...
I'm trying to get drilled down to understand, Counselor, what you really said. Let's suppose that the Supreme Court issued, well, let's take Calais, the Calais decision. Okay, the Supreme Court ruled. Some like it, some don't. The president was not a party, nor was Chairman Grassley. Mm-hmm. If they disagree with Calais, the president or Chairman Grassley, can they just ignore it? Is that what you're saying?
No, I wouldn't say ignore it. They're obligated to carry the judgment into effect insofar as
Tell me what you do. I'm confused. I'm sorry. I agree with you. Everybody should pay attention to the Constitution.
Can I provide a concrete example from history?
No, because I'm running out of time. I'm sorry. We'll talk about this later. I just don't. Do you think any of us have the right to defy a federal court order?
Generally, no, with an exception.
What do you mean generally?
So there's an exception for orders issued in cases where the court lacks jurisdiction, setting that aside.
Wait, there's an exception for what?
If a court issues an order in a case in which it lacks jurisdiction, then parties are not bound by that order, but generally speaking, they are bound.
Why don't you just appeal it in that case?
You can do that, but the courts have...
So if in your opinion, the court didn't have jurisdiction, you can ignore it?
Again, generally no, but there's a long-stated exception in the law that courts have recognized for when the lower court lacked jurisdiction. Now, I would never advise a client to do that, because if you're wrong...
I hope not.
Right.
I mean, this business of ignoring a federal court order is nonsense. It's nonsense on stilts. You may not agree with a court order. That's fine. This is America. You don't have to agree with it. You can. That's why God made courts of appeal. But you're not suggesting that we don't all have to give me an instant. I'm way over. Give me an instance where you think a federal court order could be ignored?
The only one of which I'm aware is if a court had no jurisdiction over the case and issues the order anyway, and you don't follow it, you cannot later be held in contempt for doing so. But aside from that, parties must follow
Who
court
gets
orders.
to determine, this is my last question, Mr. Chairman, you've been very patient. Who gets to determine whether they lack jurisdiction?
Effectively, the appeals court. That's why I would never advise a client to do this, because if you're wrong that they lack jurisdiction, then you're
Okay.
going to be held in contempt.
All right, thank you. Secretary, thank you for being here. We need more ships. We're going to give you money to build more ships. You need to get those ships built. You need to build as many of them as you can in Louisiana, but let's get them built. General, is Russia our friend?
Sir, they're not.
Between Ukraine and Russia, who do we want to win that war?
Well, we prefer there not be a war, but
Well,
obviously,
but there is. Who do we want to win?
obviously we want Ukraine to stand independently and not be consumed by Russia.
Okay. Now, when Putin went into Ukraine, he thought he was going to roll in and take it over in 2 days like thunder on a summer night, didn't he?
I believe he did.
But the Ukrainian people have fought back, haven't they?
Yes, sir, they have fought back.
And they now have some of the most sophisticated drone technology in the history of the world, don't they?
Sir, they do. They're doing very well with drones.
And they're giving, with the limited resources they have, they're giving Russia a curb stomping, aren't they?
I would say they are.
In fact, they have knocked out, with their limited resources, 40% of Russia's export ability of their oil. They, since January, using their drones and limited cruise missiles, they have hit oil and gas facilities within Russia over 100 times. Not on the border, within Russia, right?
Yes, sir.
And Putin was so scared, he almost had to cancel their military parade. Didn't he?
Well, I'm not sure of that, sir, but I will take your word for that, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, how much money? Now, let me just lead you. The world has $300 billion of frozen Russian assets in escrow, don't we?
I don't know, sir.
I do. It's $300 billion. And 2/3 of that, about $225 billion, is sitting in Europe, isn't it?
Again, sir, I'm not sure of that.
Well, I am. And I'm surprised, no disrespect, that you don't know. And Europe has asked our permission to take that $200 to $225 billion. Well, I mean, strike that. That $225 billion, humor me, that's sitting there frozen. Not a single penny is American taxpayer money, is it?
I don't believe it is.
No. It all belongs to Russia, doesn't it?
I believe that is correct.
And the
sir.
EU has asked our permission to take that money and give it to Ukraine so they can knock Russia in the next week and let's get this war over. That's a good idea, don't you think?
Well, I think anything that can be done to stop that war is a good idea, sir.
Would you support giving that $225 billion, no taxpayer money in America, to Ukraine?
Again, sir, that's outside my purview as a service chief.
Okay. Admiral, let me ask you a question. Would it be fair to say, based on his public and notorious comments, both before, during, and after the summit between President Xi and President Trump, that President Xi, how can I put this? He's nervous as a pregnant nun about what we're going to do on Taiwan, isn't he?
Sir, I do think he is concerned about our capability against any invasion of Taiwan.
I mean, talk about telegraphing your insecurities. I mean, he talked about it right out of the chute. He's practically sending us a television ad saying, I'm very worried about Taiwan. Now, we don't want a war with China, do we?
Absolutely not.
No. We want stability, though, with China, don't we?
Yes, sir.
And China doesn't recognize, President Xi doesn't recognize charity, does he?
I can't speak to that, but I would say probably not.
Well, he appreciates strength, doesn't he?
I would say so, yes.
If
sir.
you're in a bar fight with President Xi and you start quoting Socrates like we did under President Biden, you're going to get your rear end whipped, aren't you?
That's probably not a good course of action.
Yes. Okay, so why don't we go ahead? Don't you think it'd be a good idea for us to gain leverage to make weapons sales to Taiwan right now?
Sir, again, these things are very complex and a full calculus of all the levers of power that are being negotiated and worked. So generally,
I'm sorry, what more do we have to know, Admiral? President Xi has telegraphed his anxiety, his insecurity, now that he knows that America has learned how to fight. We want leverage. We want stability, not a hot war. We want leverage. What's his insecurity? Taiwan. Why don't we just go ahead and sell the weapons to Taiwan that Taiwan wants? The president can call President Xi and say, hey, President Xi, don't take it personally. Don't get excited. Don't get your bowels in an uproar. But I'm selling these weapons. Why wouldn't we do that?
we definitely want Taiwan to be as strong as they can be, sir.
They'd be stronger with those weapons, though, wouldn't they?
Yes, sir.
Don't you think we ought to sell them?
Sir, I'm not going to get in front of the administration's overall calculus on that. That's just not I'm not going to make a statement on that as a service chief.
Okay.
But the capabilities that we're talking about would make them more effective.
I know cost of living is a problem in America today. We all know that, Mr. President. I like to say when moms and dads go to sleep at night and can't, you know, one of the things they're worried about is cost of living. I get that. What could we do to help? Well, obviously, one thing we could do would be to lower taxes. We've got to be careful how we do that because we don't want to increase the deficit. We don't want to just borrow money to do that. Another thing we could do to help would be to lower interest rates. If we lowered interest rates, people would pay less interest on their credit cards, on their car loans, on their house notes. Well, what could we do, Mr. President, and you know this, to spend less so we could cut taxes and also lower interest rates? One of the things we could do is stop fraud. One of the things we can do is stop the outrageous fraud in our Medicaid program. Now, look, I want to be very clear here. I'm proud of Medicaid. I mean, I'm proud of the fact that in our country, if you're too poor to be sick, we will pay for your doctor. That's not true in every country, as you know, Mr. President. Some countries, they'll just let you die in a ditch. We don't do that in America. We will pay for your medical care. But that's outrageously expensive. It's okay, money well spent, but it's very, very expensive. And one of the ways we pay for people's care, particularly for low-income Americans, but also now even more so for middle-class Americans since Obamacare passed, is through Medicaid. We spend almost $1 trillion on Medicaid every year. And once again, I'm not speaking against the concept of Medicaid. We don't want people to die in America. It's one of the things that separates us from other people. But we spend almost $1 trillion a year, and the federal government, some people don't know this, pays for 67% of all Medicaid spending. Some people refer to Medicaid as a federal state program, and it is. The state puts up some of the money, but the federal government puts up most of the money. We pay for about 67% of all the spending in Medicaid. And Medicaid keeps going up. I mean, I've seen studies that show it's going up anywhere consistently between 6 and 8% every single year. And when you're spending $1 trillion and it goes up 6 to 8%, you're talking about real money. What we also know is that there's enormous amount of fraud in Medicaid. I mean, we know that. There are a lot of studies out there, and not everyone can agree on how much, but I have seen studies from reputable think tanks that show that Medicaid fraud, stealing in the Medicaid program, runs between $1.1 and $1.2 trillion over a 10-year period. Can you imagine what we could do to lower interest rates or to reduce taxes if we could save $1.2 trillion on our budget? Now, how does this happen? Well, first of all, why don't the states do a better job of controlling the fraud? And I say, why am I blaming the states? Well, because it's a federal-state program, and the feds put up 67% of the money, but the states administer that program. And some states do a pretty good job. Some states do a very good job. Some states are terrible at it. I don't know exactly why that is, but every state, I want to make this clear, has fraud. I saw an audit done by our Inspector General in Louisiana a few years ago, and he talked about the incidence of fraud in the Medicaid program in Louisiana, the people who were getting Medicaid who didn't qualify. And I said, can you send me a list of all the people you found in the Medicaid program who didn't qualify, who were making too much money? I don't want names. I just want the amounts of money that they were making and how long they'd been on Medicaid. And he sent me the list, and if I stacked it up here, I could stand on it and paint the ceiling. I mean, we had people making $150,000, $200,000, $250,000 a year getting Medicaid. Now, that was the state's fault for not checking. Some people say the states don't have any incentive. That's a cynical view. I prefer not to believe that's true. But they see Medicaid as free money, since the federal government is picking up most of the tab. I prefer not to think that's true, but it's probably true to some extent. The point is that if our states would do a better job administering the Medicaid program, and stopping the stealing, we could save $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years to help people reach the point where they don't have to sell blood plasma to go to the grocery store. You probably think I'm going to talk about Minnesota, and I'm not. We all know what happened in the Medicaid program in Minnesota. The state of Minnesota basically declared that Medicaid was an open bar. Just come on down, and if you want Medicaid and you want the Medicaid money and you want to steal some, you're welcome to it. I hate to say that, but that's what happened. And I hope every single person who's involved in that stealing up there goes to jail. Every single one. But what I wanted to talk about was, and again, every state has this problem, but some have it worse than others. And one of the ones besides Minnesota that seems to have a problem controlling stealing in the Medicaid program is California. Now, California spends an enormous amount of money on Medicaid. They spend about $220 billion a year. The federal government, federal taxpayer puts up $140 billion of that. So the federal taxpayer, the taxpayers who pay money to the federal government put up most of the money. Not all of it, but most of the money. How much does the federal government put up vis-a-vis the state government? Well, in the Obamacare portion of Medicaid, the federal government puts up $9. So for every $1 that the state government puts up for the Medicaid program, the federal government puts up $9. Wow. And some of the public officials in California have started to look at this as free money, just free money. and they don't try to fight the fraud. Now, how do you stop the fraud? One thing a state can do is investigate people who claim they're health care providers. If you claim, we saw this as a problem in Minnesota. If you claim to be a home health provider, you're supposed to have a minimum level of qualification. If you claim to offer to provide after-school services, you're supposed to have a certain level of qualification. I don't think the government, state government in California even checks. We've got every fly-by-night artist in America, it seems, going to California to become a health care provider to get some of the money. And a lot of the times when they get that money, the money never makes it to the patient, they steal it. California, for example, has 12% of the population. In the last decade, they have been responsible for 50% of all of the new healthcare providers formed in America. Most of them are social assistants and so-called healthcare establishments. And there's an enormous amount of fraud there. We saw that once again in Minnesota, which has been publicized more, where people say, I'm now a healthcare provider. Give me the money, and so I can help people. And you give this fly-by-night healthcare provider money, and they never help people. So that's one way. The other way that you can control the spending in Medicaid is to be careful about the services you offer. You want to spend the Medicaid money on people who need it. You want to spend the Medicaid money on people who need it because they're sick. That's why we passed Medicaid. But states, once again, administer their own Medicaid programs, and for the most part, they get to decide what services their Medicaid program pays for. Now, supposedly the federal government has to sign off on it. And clearly, we've got to do a better job there, and I'll save that topic for another day. But what got my attention about California, despite the fact that they have thousands and thousands of these fly-by-night so-called health care providers who the state government in California happily gives money to, and sometimes some of that money gets to a patient, but most of the time it gets into their pocket. What got my attention was the services that California state government will pay for in its Medicaid program with money from the federal government, which has been provided by the American people. Here's an example. And this came from an article, this isn't my research, this came from an editorial in the Wall Street Journal, a recent editorial. May 16, 2026. In California, under its state government's definition of Medicaid, the California Medicaid program will pay for tribal prayers. The California Medicaid program will pay for exorcisms. The California Medicaid program will pay for herbal medicines. The California Medicaid program will pay for meal deliveries. In some cases, the California Medicaid program will pay for in-home chefs. Thousands of businesses have popped up in California that literally cater to Medicaid patients. The Medicaid program in California will pay for sports club fees. The Medicaid program in California will pay for a gym membership. The Medicaid program in California will actually pay student loans. They do it under the guise of, well, we want to encourage people to become healthcare providers and they can't do it if they have onerous financial burdens, so we'll pay for their health care. Now, once again, Medicaid is supposed to be for sick people. When you're spending other people's money, it's real easy to expand beyond that. The Medicaid program in California will pay for scooters. I get that. Sometimes that might be necessary. Bicycles, but it'll also pay for music lessons. The Medicaid program in California will also pay for art lessons. This money didn't just fall from heaven. We all thank heaven for it, but it came out of people's pockets. And that's how we end up having $1.2 trillion over a 10-year period stolen from the Medicaid program. Money that was put up by the American people. It happens in every state. Some are worse than others. Minnesota's an example, but so is California. When you're taking American taxpayer dollars and spending them on an exorcism or a gym membership, something's wrong. And if we want to lower the cost of living in America, if we want to be able to find the money to give people a tax break, if we want to lower interest rates in America, one of the easiest, best ways to do it is to try to fight the fraud in our Medicaid program. It's as simple as that. $1.2 trillion over 10 years of fraud. This didn't just happen, Mr. President, as you know. This has been going on for a long, long time. And I want to give credit where credit is due. Dr. Oz, our new CMS director, the Department of Justice, are both working to try to stop this fraud. But it has been there since God was a baby. And it's got to stop now. And that's what I wanted to, and this is, it's out in the open, and this is not something I'm accusing anybody of unfairly, okay? These are just the facts. So with that, Mr. President, I thank you for your attention. I thank Kaylin for her great work, and peace out.
As the echoes of this hearing fade, one thing remains etched in the minds of everyone who watched. The illusion of the untouchable elite has been shattered. Senator John Kennedy didn't just walk into that room with questions, he walked in with a mirror, forcing D.C. to look at its own corruption. We watched as years of carefully crafted jargon and bureaucratic lies fell apart in under 10 minutes. The truth isn't complicated, it's just been suppressed, and today, Kennedy became the hammer that broke the seal of silence. This is a warning to every official who thinks they can spend taxpayer money like a drunk sailor with no accountability. The game of hiding behind classified folders and no-comment answers is officially dead. Kennedy proved that when you have the receipts, the giants aren't so big after all. But don't be fooled. The system will try to bury this. They will try to silence this video because they know that an informed public is their greatest threat. Now, I want to hear from you. The evidence is on the screen, and the panic is in their eyes. Do you believe this is the end of their game, or is the fight just beginning? Scroll down to the comments right now and type the word "done" if you believe their time is up. We are tracking every single response to show the algorithm that we want more of this truth. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to wake up. There is a video on your screen right now that goes even deeper into this scandal. Click it immediately to see the full exposure. Thank you for watching, and remember, the truth is out, and it's finally over. We'll see you in the next one.